Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
I used to think awakening looked beautiful, like a man finally realizing the truth, finally opening his heart, finally seeing the woman he once pushed away, finally becoming honest after silence, fear, and distance. But after watching these connections unfold in real life, not in quotes, not in fantasy, not in spiritual language that makes everything sound clean, I realized something much darker. Awakening is not always graceful. Sometimes it begins with collapse. Not the poetic kind. The ugly kind. The kind where he cannot sleep, but still refuses to admit why. The kind where he stares at his phone and feels sick to his stomach. The kind where he misses her, but resents her for making him feel. The kind where he knows he avoided love, but still does not know how to become the man who can face it. Divine masculine awakening is not just he realizes he loves her. No. That is the easy version. The darker truth is this. He awakens when the life he built around avoidance stops working. The mask starts cracking. The silence starts echoing. The distractions stop distracting. The ego loses its ability to make him innocent. And the woman he tried to forget becomes the mirror he cannot put down. He begins to see things he did not want to see. His fear. His emotional immaturity. His hunger for love. His inability to receive softness. His habit of running from the very intimacy his soul was begging for. And that hurts. It does not feel like enlightenment at first. It feels like shame, grief, panic, regret, longing, a strange emotional nausea, a private breakdown no one else can explain. So if you have ever wondered why the divine masculine pulls away before awakening, why he acts colder, when the connection gets deeper, why he seems to feel everything and still does nothing, this is the part we need to talk about. The dark truth behind divine masculine awakening is that before he rises, he often has to face the man he became while he was running. And that mirror can break him. Chapter 1. Awakening begins when his false peace starts feeling like a prison. I used to hear men say, "I just want peace," and believe them. Now I listen more carefully. Because sometimes peace is real. And sometimes peace is just the word a man uses when he wants relief from emotional responsibility. He may say he needed space. He may say the connection was too intense. He may say he had to protect his mental state. He may say he was choosing calm. And maybe part of that is true. But the dark part? Sometimes what he called peace was actually avoidance. It was silence without honesty. Distance without closure. Control without vulnerability. A clean-looking escape from a very messy inner world. At first, it may feel good. He does not have to answer hard questions. He does not have to look at her eyes when she knows he is hiding. He does not have to explain why he feels something but cannot show up for it. He does not have to admit that her softness reached a place he has kept locked for years. So he leaves, or goes quiet, or becomes vague. And for a moment, his nervous system relaxes. No pressure, no emotional demand, no trembling intimacy. Just space. But then the space changes. It stops feeling like peace. It starts feeling like emptiness. This is where awakening begins. Not in a sudden burst of love. In the quiet discomfort of realizing his escape did not free him. He may be sitting in his car after work, engine off, keys still in his hand, not ready to go inside. Nothing dramatic happened. No new message. No argument. No external crisis. But his chest feels heavy. He checks his phone. Not because he plans to call her. Just to see. And when there is nothing there, the silence feels different. Not peaceful. Final. Or maybe not final. Maybe worse. Unfinished. That is the thing about false peace. It does not stay peaceful. A man can remove himself from the situation, but still carry the emotional consequence of what he avoided. He can stop speaking to her, but still hear the conversation he never finished. He can choose distance, but still feel the connection moving around inside him like a truth with nowhere to go. And eventually he starts asking the question he has been avoiding. If this was peace, why do I still feel disturbed? That question is dangerous to the ego. The ego wants to keep the story simple. She was too much. It was complicated. I needed space. I did what was best. But the body begins telling another story. The body remembers her. The body remembers the ache after pulling away. The body remembers the way his throat closed when she asked for honesty. The body remembers how much effort it took to pretend he did not care. Awakening begins when his false peace starts feeling like a prison. He realizes the silence protected him from her, but trapped him with himself. And maybe that is what he was afraid of all along. Not her emotions. His own. Lesson of this chapter. The first dark truth is that what he called peace may have been avoidance. Awakening begins when distance no longer feels like freedom, and he realizes he is still carrying everything he tried to escape. And once false peace stops working, the silence begins to speak. Chapter 2. The silence becomes louder than her voice ever was. I have seen silence do something strange to avoidant hearts. At first, it feels like control. Later, it becomes confession. When she was speaking, he could defend himself. He could focus on her tone, her timing, her emotion, the way she asked, the way she needed clarity when he was not ready to offer it. He could make her voice the problem. But after separation, after distance, after the emotional noise fades, her voice is gone. And somehow, the silence becomes louder. This is one of the darker parts of divine masculine awakening. He realizes the absence of her voice does not mean the absence of truth. She is not asking anymore. But the questions remain. Why did you go quiet? Why did you make her guess? Why did you act like uncertainty was harmless? Why did you let her carry the emotional weight alone? These questions do not arrive as neat thoughts. They come as pressure. In the chest. In the stomach. In the restless way he moves through ordinary tasks. He may be making coffee and suddenly remember the look on her face when she stopped explaining. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. A kind of tired that says, I have said this in every language I know. That memory can hit harder than an argument. Because when someone is still fighting, you can tell yourself there is time. But when someone goes quiet from exhaustion, something has already changed. He may begin to understand that her silence was not coldness. It was self-protection. That realization hurts. A lot. He may remember her last real attempt. Maybe she asked for clarity. Maybe she said she felt confused. Maybe she told him his distance hurt. Maybe she did not say much at all, but her eyes said what her mouth had stopped trying to translate. And he did what he knew how to do. He shut down. At the time, silence felt safer. Now, silence feels like evidence. Evidence of the moment he did not meet. Evidence of the truth he postponed. Evidence of the way he made her stand alone in a connection he also felt. That is a hard mirror. He may not be ready to apologize. He may not be ready to reach out. He may not know how to explain himself. But he starts hearing the words he never said. I was afraid. I did care. I did not know how to handle what you awakened in me. I made silence carry what honesty should have carried. This is where the inner collapse deepens. Because silence used to help him avoid exposure. Now it exposes him. It reveals that saying nothing was not neutral. It had impact. It left someone else inside a fog. It made her nervous system search for meaning where he refused to bring clarity. And this is the dark truth. Sometimes a man does not realize how loud his silence was until he is forced to sit inside it himself. When she stops filling the space, he finally hears what his absence created. Lesson of this chapter. The silence becomes louder than her voice because it holds everything he avoided saying. Once she is no longer explaining, he begins to hear the emotional impact of what he left unfinished. And when silence turns into a mirror, the mask starts feeling too heavy to wear. Chapter 3. The mask cracks when he realizes he was not as untouched as he pretended. I used to think emotional control meant someone was unaffected. Now I know better. Some people are not calm. They are contained. There is a difference. The divine masculine may have looked composed. Maybe he responded less. Maybe he acted casual. Maybe he made the connection seem smaller than it was. Maybe he walked away with a face that gave nothing away. But inside, something was moving. He may have been touched more deeply than he ever showed. That is part of the dark truth behind awakening. He has to face the gap between what he performed and what he felt. That gap can become unbearable. He remembers the intimacy, the eye contact, the silence that felt too honest, the moment she saw through him and he wanted to look away, the way his body softened before his mind pulled him back into control. And then he remembers how he acted afterward. Distant, cold, logical, vague, unavailable, like nothing happened, like he did not feel the shift in the room, like he did not carry her energy after leaving, like his heart had not moved. That is where the mask cracks. Not because she exposes him, because he exposes himself to himself. He begins to see that indifference was not truth. It was protection. He was not untouched. He was afraid of being touched. That realization can bring shame. Not the useful kind. The kind that makes him want to disappear again. He may think, why did I act like that? Why did I make it seem like she imagined it? Why did I hide something that was real? Why did I punish vulnerability with distance? These are not easy questions. They threaten the identity he built. The identity of the man who is stable, independent, unbothered, in control, not easily affected, not emotionally messy. But awakening does not care about the image. It asks for truth. And the truth may be that he was affected. Very affected. He just did not have the emotional skill to hold that without retreating. This is a painful distinction. Feeling deeply does not mean a man knows how to love deeply. Being moved does not mean he knows how to move with maturity. Being touched by a soul connection does not mean he knows how to protect the human heart in front of him. That is where the feminine often gets hurt. She feels the depth. Then she meets the mask. She feels the soul. Then she meets the avoidance. She sees the man underneath. Then his behavior hands her the defended version. And he may not understand the damage until later. Until awakening begins. Until the mask no longer feels like strength, but like a lie he kept repeating. A man can only perform being untouched for so long before the body starts rebelling. The memory returns. The longing returns. The regret returns. The softness returns in inconvenient moments. He may be standing in a crowded place and suddenly feel alone because no one there knows the part of him she reached. That is when the mask gets heavy. Too heavy. And the man underneath begins to breathe. Lesson of this chapter. The mask cracks when he realizes he was never as untouched as he pretended. His distance was not proof that he felt nothing. It was often proof that he did not know how to handle what he felt. And once the mask begins to crack, the buried grief starts rising. Chapter 4. He grieves what he ruined before he knew how much it mattered. I have always thought the saddest grief is the grief that arrives late. The kind that comes after someone has already acted like they did not care. After the door has changed. After the woman has stopped reaching. After the connection has become a memory he cannot comfortably hold. This is one of the darkest parts of divine masculine awakening. He may grieve what he ruined before he understood its value. Not because he is evil. Not because he wanted to destroy something sacred. But because fear made decisions that love was too quiet to challenge at the time. He may look back and see it. The moment he should have spoken. The moment he should have stayed. The moment he should have been honest instead of vague. The moment he should have said, I am scared, instead of becoming cold. That kind of hindsight can break a person. He may remember her softness differently now. At the time, maybe it felt available, almost endless. He may have assumed she would keep understanding, keep waiting, keep feeling him underneath the distance, keep translating his silence into hidden love. But now, with space, he sees the cost. Her softness had a cost. Her patience had a cost. Her emotional labor had a cost. She was not endlessly open because she was weak. She was trying to protect something she felt was real. She was trying to meet him where he could not yet meet himself. And he may have taken that for granted. This realization creates grief with guilt inside it. A heavy combination. He misses her, but the missing is complicated by the memory of how he behaved. He wants to reach, but knows reaching would require more than longing. He wants to say sorry, but feels the word is too small. He wants to go back, but understands the version of her he left may not exist anymore. That is a dark awakening. The grief is not only, I lost her. It becomes, I did not honor her when I had access. That sentence has weight. It can make him feel physically heavy. He may sit at the edge of his bed at night, elbows on knees, phone in hand, staring at her name or an old photo, not moving, not crying, not texting, just frozen. Because grief and shame together can paralyze. He may think, what if I am too late? What if she is peaceful now? What if my apology only opens her wound? What if I come back and still do not know how to stay? This is where awakening becomes morally uncomfortable. He cannot simply romanticize the connection anymore. He has to face the impact of his fear. And that is darker than missing someone. Missing is about desire. Impact is about responsibility. He may begin to see that love was present, but responsibility was not. Desire was present, but consistency was not. Feeling was present, but emotional courage was not. And that grief becomes a teacher if he lets it. It teaches him that sacred things can be lost when they are not honored. Not because the universe is cruel, because human hearts have limits. Even the soft ones. Especially the soft ones that have had to learn boundaries. Lesson of this chapter. He grieves what he ruined before he knew how much it mattered. The dark part of awakening is realizing that love may have been present, but his fear kept him from honoring it responsibly. And once grief turns into responsibility, he must face the wound that made him run. Chapter 5. He discovers the wound behind his avoidance. I have never seen true avoidance without a wound underneath. Never. There is always a story in the body. Maybe not one he can explain clearly. Maybe not one he even remembers fully. But the body remembers enough. It remembers when softness was unsafe, when need was ignored, when emotion was punished, when vulnerability became humiliation, when love came with pressure, criticism, abandonment, or control. The divine masculine may not call it trauma. He may call it personality. I'm just not emotional. I need space. I don't like drama. I'm better alone. I'm not good at this. But awakening begins to reveal something more uncomfortable. Maybe he is not simply independent. Maybe he is defended. Maybe he is not calm. Maybe he is shut down. Maybe he is not emotionally simple. Maybe he is emotionally injured. That discovery is dark. Not because it makes him broken. Because it removes the illusion that avoidance is just how he is. He begins to see the wound behind the pattern. He sees that he pulls away when closeness starts touching old fear. He sees that he becomes cold when he feels exposed. He sees that he calls it confusion when the real feeling is vulnerability. He sees that silence has been his way of keeping control when the heart feels too open. And then he may ask the question that changes everything. Was I running from her? Or from the pain she awakened? That question can undo years of self-protection. He may remember childhood moments, old relationships, emotional environments where he learned not to need too much, not to speak too honestly, not to trust softness too quickly. He may realize he learned to leave internally before anyone could leave him externally. That is a wound. A quiet one. A masculine one. The kind that often hides behind productivity, humor, charm, distance, or competence. And this is where awakening becomes less romantic and more psychological. It is not just he misses her. It is he is meeting the part of himself that made intimacy feel dangerous. That is heavy work. Uncomfortable work. Work many people avoid for a lifetime. He may feel anger. At himself. At her. At the past. At the fact that he feels anything at all. He may resent the connection for exposing the wound. He may resent her for being the one who reached it. He may even tell himself she caused the chaos. But if he keeps going deeper, he sees the difference. She did not create the wound. She touched it, and the wound reacted. This is the beginning of responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility. He can say, I was wounded, and also say, my wound still affected someone else. Both are true. This is what mature awakening requires. The courage to hold compassion and accountability in the same hands. The wound may explain why he ran. It does not make the damage disappear. And if he truly wants to awaken, he must stop making other people pay for what he refuses to heal. That sentence is hard, but necessary. Lesson of this chapter. He discovers that avoidance was not just a preference, it was protection around an old wound. Awakening begins when he realizes he was reacting to past pain as much as present love. And once he sees the wound, he can no longer use it as an excuse to stay unconscious. Chapter 6. He feels shame before he learns responsibility. I have seen shame interrupt awakening more than pain does. Pain can open someone. Shame can make them hide. This is one of the darkest truths behind divine masculine awakening. When he starts seeing what he avoided, how he acted, what he took for granted, and how his silence affected her, he may not immediately become accountable. He may first become ashamed. And shame is tricky. It can look like remorse, but it often becomes another form of avoidance. He may think, I hurt her. Then instead of reaching honesty, he spirals into, I am terrible. I ruin everything. She is better off without me. That can sound self-aware. But sometimes it is still self-protection. Because if he collapses into shame, he does not have to do the harder work of repair. He does not have to listen. He does not have to show up. He does not have to face her pain without making it about his unworthiness. Shame centers the self. Responsibility considers the other. That distinction matters. A man in shame says, I feel so bad. A man in responsibility asks, how did this affect you? A man in shame disappears because he cannot tolerate his own guilt. A man in responsibility learns to stay present with discomfort. A man in shame wants reassurance that he is not bad. A man in responsibility understands that repair is not about being comforted. This is a painful transition. He may feel both. Shame and responsibility. Collapse and courage. The instinct to hide and the deeper call to become honest. He may sit with his phone, wanting to apologize, but the shame rises like heat in the body. What if she tells me how much I hurt her? What if I cannot handle hearing it? What if I say the wrong thing? What if my apology is selfish? What if I am too late? These questions can freeze him. And from the outside, it looks like he does not care. But inside, he may be trapped between guilt and fear. This does not mean she should wait forever. It does not mean his silence is acceptable. It simply reveals the dark machinery of awakening. A man can be realizing everything and still not yet have the courage to act from that realization. That is the brutal part. Awareness is not the same as maturity. Feeling guilt is not the same as making repair. Missing her is not the same as showing up differently. So what must happen? Shame must mature into responsibility. He must stop making his guilt the center of the story. He must stop using "I am broken" as a reason to stay unavailable. He must learn to say, I was afraid and I still had impact. I feel ashamed, but I will not make you carry my shame. I do not want to defend myself. I want to understand. I cannot change what I did, but I can stop pretending it did not matter. That is awakening. Not a beautiful speech. A shift in posture. From hiding to owning. From collapse to humility. From self-punishment to repair. And this is where he begins becoming emotionally adult. Not when he feels bad. When he becomes responsible for what feeling bad is asking him to change. Lesson of this chapter. He often feels shame before he learns responsibility. Shame may make him hide, but true awakening begins when he can face impact without collapsing, defending, or making his guilt the center. And once shame turns into responsibility, he begins to see love differently. Chapter 7. He realizes love is not just what he feels privately. I have heard this sentence in different forms so many times. But I did care. And I believe it. Sometimes he did care. Deeply. Privately. In ways he never said. But here is the dark truth. Private love can still leave someone feeling unloved. That is one of the hardest lessons in divine masculine awakening. He may have felt her, missed her, wanted her, dreamed of her, thought about her in silence, carried emotions he did not know how to speak. But if none of that became presence, clarity, communication, or care, what was she supposed to hold? The feminine cannot build emotional safety on invisible feeling. She cannot rest her nervous system on what he refuses to express. She cannot keep translating silence into love forever. At some point, love has to become behavior. This realization can hit him hard. He may think back and say, I loved her in my way. Then another voice inside asks, did your way make her feel safe? That question is brutal. It cuts through spiritual romance. It cuts through excuses. It cuts through the fantasy that depth alone is enough. A soul connection may explain the intensity. It does not excuse emotional absence. He begins to realize that hidden feelings did not protect her. His private longing did not reassure her. His unspoken care did not prevent confusion. His silent love may have been real, but it was not relationally responsible. This is where awakening becomes grounded. Not mystical. Grounded. Love is not only energy. Love is how you treat someone's nervous system. Love is whether your presence creates clarity or fog. Love is whether you communicate when silence would be easier. Love is whether you repair after you hurt someone. Love is whether your fear becomes honesty instead of disappearance. He may begin seeing the gap. The gap between how much he felt and how little he showed. The gap between his inner world and her lived experience. The gap between soul recognition and human responsibility. That gap can grieve him. Because he may understand too late that she was not asking for perfection. She was asking for something human. A reachable man. A man who could say, I am overwhelmed, instead of vanishing. A man who could say, I care, but I am scared, instead of acting indifferent. A man who could make love feel like a place to breathe, not a place to guess. And this is where he starts realizing the darker truth. He may have loved her, but he did not know how to love her well. That sentence is painful. It holds both truth and accountability. It does not erase the love. It does not excuse the harm. It simply tells the whole story. And a man cannot awaken while clinging to half the story. He must see both. What he felt, and what he failed to embody. Lesson of this chapter. He realizes love is not only what he feels privately. True awakening forces him to see that love must become presence, communication, safety, and consistent care. And once he sees the gap between feeling and behavior, he must decide whether he is willing to change. Chapter 8. He faces the terror of actually becoming different. I have noticed something people rarely admit. Some people do not only fear staying stuck. They fear changing. Because change means losing the identity that kept them safe. For the divine masculine, awakening is not just realizing the truth. It is facing the terror of becoming someone who lives differently. That can scare him more than losing her. Think about it. If he becomes different, he cannot keep using silence the same way. He cannot keep calling avoidance peace. He cannot keep entering intimacy only when it feels comfortable. He cannot keep receiving feminine softness while refusing emotional responsibility. He has to become more honest, more vulnerable, more accountable, more present. That sounds beautiful from a distance. Up close, it is terrifying. He may ask himself, who am I if I stop hiding? Who am I if I admit I need love? Who am I if I let someone see my fear? Who am I if I cannot use control as my only safety anymore? These are not small questions. They are identity-level questions. The masculine mask may be painful, but it is familiar. And familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar healing. This is why awakening often creates resistance. He may see the truth and still hesitate. He may want to change and still repeat old patterns. He may feel love and still go quiet. He may understand the lesson and still fear living from it. That does not make the awakening fake. It makes it incomplete. Real change requires practice. He has to practice saying what is uncomfortable. Practice staying in the room when shame rises. Practice asking for time without disappearing. Practice hearing her pain without becoming defensive. Practice letting tenderness exist without immediately controlling it. This is where the fantasy of awakening meets the reality of growth. Growth is not a sudden transformation. It is hundreds of small moments where he chooses not to obey the old wound. And sometimes he fails. That is the messy truth. He may awaken in awareness before he awakens in behavior. He may know better before he does better consistently. This is important for the feminine to understand. Do not confuse his awareness with readiness. A man can understand the pattern and still not yet have the strength to interrupt it every time. He can speak beautifully and still need to prove that the words have roots. Watch the roots. Not the emotional moment. Not the confession. Not the late-night vulnerability. The roots. Does he communicate after the emotional wave passes? Does he repair when he gets it wrong? Does he respect boundaries when they inconvenience him? Does he choose truth when avoidance would be easier? That is where change becomes real. The dark truth is that awakening asks him to let an entire false version of himself die. The version who could stay hidden. The version who could pretend. The version who could make her carry the emotional unknown. The version who could avoid without feeling the consequence. And death of identity is frightening. Even when the identity was hurting him. Even when it was hurting her. So he stands at the edge. Aware. Afraid. Called. Not yet fully transformed. And the next choice matters. Lesson of this chapter. He faces the terror of actually becoming different. Awakening is not only seeing the truth. It is practicing new behavior when the old mask, silence, and avoidance feel safer. And once he understands change will cost him his false self. He must choose whether awakening is worth the death of who he pretended to be. Chapter 9. The dark night of the masculine is not romantic. I need to say this plainly. His dark night is not your love story. It may involve you. It may have been triggered by you. It may be connected to the bond. But his collapse, confusion, regret, and awakening are not automatically proof that he is ready to love you well. This is one of the most important truths for the divine feminine. The masculine dark night can look intense. He may feel her deeply, dream of her, miss her, regret losing her, break down privately, realize things he avoided for months or years. But intensity is not the same as maturity. Pain is not the same as accountability. Awakening symptoms are not the same as embodied change. This is where many women get pulled back into the old pattern. She senses he is going through something. She feels his energy. She notices the signs. She hears from him after silence, and his voice sounds different, softer, more emotional, more open. And her heart wants to believe. This is it. He is awake now. But slow down. Breathe. A dark night can open a man. It can humble him. It can reveal truth. But it does not automatically teach him how to communicate, repair, regulate his nervous system, or love consistently. Those are skills, practices, choices, not just feelings. The dark night is not romantic because it is often messy and self-centered at first. He may be consumed by his pain, his regret, his longing, his guilt, his fear of losing access, his fear of being too late. He may still not fully see her yet. Not her experience. Not her nervous system. Not the cost of his avoidance. Not the woman she had to become after being hurt. That seeing takes maturity. So the feminine must remain awake too. She can have compassion without becoming the caretaker of his awakening. She can listen without abandoning discernment. She can honor the connection without rushing back into emotional labor. She can say, I feel that something is shifting, and still ask, is there consistent behavior? This is not cold. This is wisdom. The dark night belongs to him. Her healing belongs to her. If she rushes in to rescue him from the pain that is finally waking him, she may interrupt the very process he needs to complete. That is a hard truth for women with deep compassion. Especially women who can feel his pain. Especially women who know his heart underneath the mask. But knowing his heart does not mean carrying his growth. Seeing his potential does not mean living inside the gap between who he is and who he could become. The dark night of the masculine is not romantic. It is an initiation. An initiation must produce responsibility. If it does not, it remains emotional intensity. A real awakening will not ask her to shrink. It will not ask her to forget what happened. It will not ask her to reopen without trust. It will not punish her for boundaries. A real awakening respects the woman who survived the darkness too. Lesson of this chapter. The masculine dark night may be intense, but it is not automatically romantic or safe. His pain must become responsibility before it can become a new foundation. And once the feminine stops romanticizing his collapse, she can finally see what awakening really requires. Chapter 10. The real awakening is not when he misses her. It is when he stops running from himself. I want to end with the part that feels the most honest. The divine masculine does not truly awaken just because he misses her. He does not awaken just because he feels the bond. He does not awaken just because he dreams of her, regrets losing her, or realizes she was different. Those may be openings. But real awakening is deeper. Real awakening begins when he stops running from himself. When he stops using silence as a shield. When he stops turning fear into distance. When he stops calling emotional immaturity needing space. When he stops making the feminine responsible for interpreting what he refuses to speak. When he looks at his own pattern and says, "This is mine." That sentence is the beginning. Not "she triggered me." Not "the connection was too much." Not "I was overwhelmed." But "this is mine." My fear. My avoidance. My silence. My wound. My responsibility to heal. That is the dark truth behind divine masculine awakening. It is not only about loving her. It is about becoming a man who can stop abandoning himself when love gets real. Because every time he ran from intimacy, he also ran from a part of himself. The part that wanted to be known. The part that wanted to trust. The part that wanted to soften. The part that wanted to stop performing strength and start living truth. She may have awakened that part. But he has to choose it. No woman can choose it for him. Not through chasing. Not through explaining. Not through waiting. Not through loving him harder than he loves his own healing. He must decide. Will he keep hiding inside the familiar pain of avoidance? Or will he step into the unfamiliar courage of presence? Will he keep missing her privately? Or will he become honest publicly? Will he keep feeling the connection spiritually? Or will he learn how to honor it humanly? That is the final threshold. And for the divine feminine, there is also a threshold. She must stop confusing his emotional collapse with her emotional responsibility. She can love him. She can feel him. She can understand him deeply. But she cannot become the bridge he refuses to walk. She cannot become the voice for the truth he refuses to speak. She cannot sacrifice her nervous system for a man still learning how to face his own. Her awakening matters too. Maybe her lesson is not to wait until he becomes the man she saw in his soul. Maybe her lesson is to become the woman who no longer abandons herself for potential. Maybe the darkest truth is not only that he ran. Maybe it is that she kept reaching into the distance, hoping her love could do his inner work for him. And maybe the light begins when both people stop. He stops running. She stops chasing. He faces himself. She returns to herself. He learns responsibility. She learns discernment. He stops hiding behind fear. She stops calling overgiving devotion. That is when the connection becomes sacred in the real sense. Not because it guarantees reunion, but because it forces truth. And truth changes people. If they let it. So let this be the final message. Divine masculine awakening is dark before it is beautiful because it strips away the fantasy of who he thought he was. It forces him to face the wound, the mask, the silence, the grief, the shame, the longing, and the love he did not know how to honor. But the darkness is not the destination. It is the place where he decides whether he will keep surviving through avoidance, or finally begin living through truth. If this message touched something in you, write in the comments. Truth is the awakening. Like this video if it gave you clarity. Subscribe for more spiritual psychology, divine masculine, divine feminine, soul connection, separation, and emotional awakening insights. And share this with someone who needs to remember. A man does not awaken when he misses the woman he lost. He awakens when he stops abandoning the truth inside himself. Lesson of this chapter. Real divine masculine awakening is not proven by longing, regret, or emotional collapse. It begins when he stops running from himself and takes responsibility for his fear, silence, wounds, and capacity to love. And if he chooses truth, the darkness was not the end. It was the doorway.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.